They say power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. But what happens when that power lands in the hands of someone who's never earned it? In Maplewood Estates, one woman thought she ruled the neighborhood until she picked a fight with the wrong man, a man who spent his life putting tyrants behind bars. Before we continue, welcome to the HOA Karen Stories. If you love seeing arrogance meet its match, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments. For 10 quiet years, Elliot Grant lived the kind of peace he'd earned. A retired district attorney, he'd traded courtroom battles for his small garden, carrots, tomatoes, and a single apple tree that shaded his backyard like a promise of calm. Neighbors loved him. Kids waved when he drove by in his old blue truck. Even the mailman lingered sometimes just to hear one of his stories from the days when he fought corruption in court. Eliot wasn't a man of confrontation anymore. He believed peace was the highest form of strength. But that belief was about to be tested. When Patricia Langford became president of the newly reformed Maplewood HOA, the entire neighborhood changed overnight. Patricia had money, influence, and a reputation for micromanaging everything within a 5-block radius. She didn't just walk around, she inspected every blade of grass, every mailbox, every fence post. To her, rules weren't for order, they were for control. And when she spoke, people listened or paid fines. Within 48 hours of her appointment, envelopes started showing up on doorsteps. Violation notices for the most ridiculous things imaginable. Mailboxes an inch too tall, cars parked slightly off center, even Christmas lights left up one day too long. But one envelope, the one that landed on Elliot's porch, carried a threat far deeper than a fine. According to Patricia's beautification policy, Elliot's apple tree, the one that had stood for nearly a decade, was now a safety hazard. The notice demanded he cut it down within 7 days or face daily penalties. Elliot read the letter twice, then calmly folded it and placed it on his kitchen counter. He wasn't cutting down that tree. When Patricia showed up 2 days later, clipboard in hand and sunglasses perched like a crown, Elliot greeted her politely at the gate. "Mr. Grant, I'm sure you've received my notice," she said, eyeing the apple tree. "Yes, ma'am," Elliot replied evenly. "And I've decided not to comply. That tree's older than the HOA itself." Patricia's lips tightened. "Rules are rules, Mr. Grant. If I let you slide, I'd have to let everyone else slide too." "Then maybe your rules need rewriting," he said quietly, turning back toward his house. She hated that, being dismissed. Within hours, she called in her enforcers. The next morning, a black SUV rolled up to Elliot's home, gravel crunching under heavy tires. Out stepped 5 men, built like security guards but dressed in identical navy polos stamped Maplewood Compliance Team. 2 of them carried chainsaws. The others had clipboards and body cams clipped to their chests like badges of honor. But there was something off. The confidence in their stride, the sneer in their tone. These weren't ordinary rule enforcers. Elliot knew the type. He'd spent decades dismantling their kind in court, men who hid behind authority they didn't earn. "Morning, sir," one of them said, his tone dripping with mock respect. "We're here under HOA orders to remove that tree." "You mean trespass on private property," Elliot corrected. "You can make this easy or hard," another barked, hand resting on his utility belt like he expected a gun to be there. Elliot didn't flinch. He watched them, the way they looked past him, scanning the yard as if it already belonged to them. Then he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Before you start cutting," he said, "you might want to check who you're dealing with." He turned and disappeared into his house. The men exchanged confused glances. The sound of the screen door slamming was the only thing that broke the silence. Uh, when Elliot returned, he was carrying a thick leather folder, old but well kept. He laid it across the porch railing, opened it slowly, and began removing documents one by one: property deeds, legal exemptions, environmental certifications, and finally a laminated letter embossed with the state seal. "This," he said, tapping the letter, "is an official designation from the Department of Urban Agriculture recognizing this property as a private cultivation zone. The apple tree you're threatening to cut is legally protected. Destroying it would violate Section 14.3 of the Municipal Environmental Code, a felony offense punishable by up to 3 years in prison." The chainsaw in one man's hand dropped slightly. Another shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Elliot and the folder. Then Elliot looked up, his voice calm but his gaze razor sharp. "And you," he said, pointing to the biggest of the group, "used to wear a badge, didn't you? Officer Darren Pike, fired for evidence tampering, if I recall correctly." The man froze. He hadn't heard that name in years, not from someone who wasn't supposed to know. "And you," Elliot said, turning to another, "were security at the Westfield Mall. Caught roughing up a teenager in the parking lot, weren't you? I read that case file myself." By now, all five were silent. Elliot stepped closer, voice low and steady. "See, gentlemen, I'm not just some old man with a garden. I'm the one who used to prosecute men like you, and I still know exactly which judges owe me favors." He closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. "Now, if you're wise, you'll get back in that SUV, drive to your boss, and tell her that if she wants a fight, she'd better bring a lawyer." For a moment, nobody moved. Then, one by one, they turned, trudging back to their vehicle under the watchful gaze of the man they had come to intimidate. The sound of the SUV's engine faded down the street, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the steady creak of the apple trees swaying in the breeze. Elliot exhaled, slow and deliberate. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. If you're still watching this, make sure you've subscribed to the HOA Karen Stories, because what happens next proves some people don't learn until the law knocks on their own door. Patricia refused to back down. The very next day, she sent the compliance team again, this time with cameras rolling, trying to intimidate him into submission. But Elliot was ready. He'd already contacted a few old friends, not just neighbors, but colleagues, a judge, a state investigator, even a local reporter who loved stories about HOA corruption. As the cameras rolled, Elliot hit record on his phone and asked one simple question: "Do you have a legal warrant to enter my property?" They didn't. Within minutes, two police cruisers arrived. Real police. The HOA's enforcers were handcuffed right there in his driveway, their fake badges confiscated. Patricia, watching from the curb, tried to intervene, shouting, "You can't arrest them. They're acting under HOA authority." The officer looked at her and said, "Ma'am, the HOA doesn't outrank the state." The video went viral that same night. Within days, Patricia was facing a civil lawsuit for harassment and abuse of power. Homeowners banded together, voting her out in a special emergency meeting. And Elliot? He didn't attend the meeting. He just sat in his backyard, sipping tea beneath his apple tree as the evening breeze carried the sound of hammers, neighbors removing all the new HOA violation signs Patricia had installed. Weeks later, the neighborhood looked peaceful again. Kids played, gardens bloomed, and for the first time in years, people waved at each other without fear of a fine. As for Elliot's apple tree, it blossomed brighter than ever that spring. A quiet reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands its ground. Because in the end, arrogance can't stand against integrity, and those who build their power on fear eventually fall to the very laws they thought they controlled. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. It helps more people find these true HOA justice stories. Drop a comment below with where you're watching from and tell us, have you ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA? Because here at the HOA Karen Stories, we make sure every Karen gets the ending they deserve.